And Dr. Tim McKnight joins us this morning on our 8:30 High Meme, our Talk with the Doc. And welcome in. Sunny day.
Thank you.
Good.
It's beautiful
and,
out, yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. But it's not nice for someone who has acid reflux. And not to make too much light of it, but this can lead to serious consequences, right?
Absolutely. It really can. And so many people have it. And people are asking me all the time, how do I manage this? Why do I have it? How do I get off medicine? So that's what I wanted to talk about. So it's a common problem, and like you said, it can be serious. We'll talk about that at the end. But the cause of this is the stomach acid contents, which is about a pH of 2 or 3, very, very acidic. It starts to reflux up into your food pipe, the esophagus. It can get all the way up to the back of the throat, and it can cause dental decay and all kinds of problems with even the teeth. So the cause of this is really twofold. There's two arms to this. One is anatomical. And so you have to understand the anatomy, which is you've got your esophagus, and then when food goes in your stomach, when food enters the stomach, there's a natural signal that goes to a little muscle at the end of the food pipe called the esophageal sphincter. And that will tighten up and close because that stomach content is very acidic, and the stomach is a muscle, and it's very mechanical, and it's squeezing really hard, and it splashes all this acid around. The purpose of the stomach is really to start the digestion of protein. It's a mechanical kind of a protein digesting kind of a organ. That's its main function. The small intestine does everything else. It helps you absorb fat, protein, or break down proteins, but carbohydrates. So the stomach is twofold. It digests protein and it kills bacteria that you swallow either in your food or in your mouth. So it's a protective organ. And when that esophageal sphincter, that muscle, doesn't close tight, the stomach acid contents can reflux up. So what causes that to not work or close tight? Well, one is caffeine. Too much caffeine will do it. Alcohol will do it. Tobacco will do it. Those are common ones. And most people, we find that it's caffeine related. So if they cut back on their caffeine, it might just go away. The other problem for this is abdominal obesity. So if your belly is a little bit big and you wear tight pants or a tight belt, the pressure from your waist will push the contents inward, and it almost acts like a blowhole. If that pressure is too high, it'll open that muscle and really reflux up. Now, babies get reflux because that muscle hasn't developed, and it takes them time to develop that muscle. But often it's just your belly's too big and your pants are too tight, and that's going to happen. So those are, and then the other mechanical reason for this is a hiatal hernia, which is what that means is the diaphragm muscle is the muscle that separates the chest from the abdominal cavity, and that the food pipe, the esophagus, has to go right through that muscle. And if that muscle doesn't fit real tight around the esophagus, and there's lots of pressure, say you're a weightlifter and you're always exerting this pressure, and some people just have this because they have a mechanical weakness in that esophagus or in the diaphragm, then the stomach will start to slide up in through that hole of the diaphragm and be actually part of the stomach in the chest cavity next to the lungs. And so that can be another reason for this because it's not really a nice tight fit. So those are the anatomical reasons why for a lot of the reflux. So you have to really cut back on caffeine, tobacco, and alcohol, and not wear tight-fitting clothes and try to lose some of the belly weight.
Oh, there's a lot of medications for heartburn.
Yes.
Is it okay to start with that?
Absolutely. When you're uncomfortable, you don't want to feel that way. So I always start with the easiest one is the bicarbonate. So you can take Tums. It's calcium carbonate. You can take a teaspoon of baking soda and put in a couple ounces of water and drink it, and you'll burp and belch. And what's happening is the acid is mixing with the bicarbonate, and it's making CO2 gas, and you relieve that pressure, and it usually works well. But that's temporary. We don't want to rely on that long term. So the other problem with acid reflux is you think about this. Think about how hard it would be for your stomach, this muscle with acid in it, if it's trying to digest a steak that you bought and you had at the steakhouse, and you brought some home, you put it in the microwave. Every time you heat it up, it makes it harder and harder to break down versus raw meat. Or think about how easy it would be to digest a raw egg versus a boiled egg, hard-boiled egg. Not suggesting that we eat raw meats and proteins, but it's a muscle and there's acid. So it takes a long time for that stomach to digest those foods. So if you're eating a lot of protein, you're going to have to make a lot of acid to really digest that well. And that potentially could put you more at risk for this. And then we know there are other foods like tomatoes and tomato sauces. They seem to have more acid production associated with them, as well as just sugars. If you're eating a lot of sugar, there's a lot of acid release because the bacteria love to feed off of that sugar. So chocolates and donuts and cookies, those can all cause more acid production and more acid reflux.
You have to leave now.
I know. Well, no, I think we could probably share, and I wouldn't complain.
All right.
So,
Yeah.
but
But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, so you start thinking about this. This is really, there's a lot of foods that can do this. But just remember that anytime you're eating cooked foods and recooked foods, especially the proteins, it's harder and harder to digest that. So the stomach has to work harder to make more acid. So these are problems that we've created for ourselves. Microwave ovens, they're convenient. I think they're a really bad idea because they take the antioxidants out of food and they make proteins harder to digest. So if you're going to do those, just chew those really, really, really well. And most people don't probably chew their meat well enough. So we talked about some of the treatments. So we have the bicarbonates, that kind of the quick, easy fix that you could just do that, from baking soda in the cupboard. And then the next level down to kind of suppress it, to protect it, are the H2 blockers, Pepcid. Tagamet used to be one. I don't think Zantac or Tagamet is not on the market anymore. There's some problems with those, but Pepcid is still the go-to. Pepcid AC. It means you take it before meals. What that does is it blocks the production or the release of stomach acid by about 70%. It does a pretty good job. It does a really good job for that acid secretion that happens at night when you're sleeping. So it can, for a mild form of acid reflux, you don't need a prescription. You go to the pharmacy, you just pick it up. And then we have the next level up are the proton pump inhibitors that really do a good job of blocking acid production. And those are prescription, and those work well. And that's what a lot of people are taking. Nexium, Protonix, Prilosec, Prantazole, and some of those, they're long-term uses, and people love them because, hey, I don't have any more heartburn. But there's a problem with those. And then one other one that I found recently, I saw a study on it and actually helped me, was melatonin. Melatonin is the natural sleep aid that your brain makes that we're usually deficient in, so we take it over the counter. But you want to get a high-quality melatonin, one that's micronized, so small particles that are absorbed well, and that can be a nice remedy for acid reflux. So what happens to the people that just take this long-term? Well, first of all, they're changing their natural physiology. Their stomach now is not a pH of 2 or 3, not really going to digest protein well, so they're going to maybe have some protein issues as far as getting what they need. But they're changing the chemistry, the pH of the stomach, and now that acid reflux that's going up is not a pH of 2 or 3. It's enough to burn, but it's maybe a higher pH. But the problem is it's not killing the bacteria because the pH is not acidic enough to do that. So now you can reflux and you can have bacteria get up in your throat, and then sometimes you can aspirate that in your lungs. So there's a real high risk of pneumonia with these long-term uses of these. And sometimes I saw somebody die from this in 2 weeks, taking 4 Nexium a day chronically. And this was not an older person. This was a younger person that probably should have survived the pneumonia. So it can cause pneumonia. It can also lead to osteoporosis. I can't remember what the exact mechanism there is, but we don't want to rely on this. And then it can be a cover-up for significant precancerous lesions of the esophagus, which is esophageal cancer. We call that Barrett's esophagus. It's like a scab that's acidically created in the stomach, in the esophageal lining, and we're covering up that scab with a Band-Aid because we don't feel it with the acid blockers, but it's never healing. It's always injured, and as it's trying to heal itself, it can become cancerous.
Yeah.
And esophageal cancer is a really tough cancer to live with and to recover from.
Well, I lost a friend through this
The whole process,
the acid reflux led to esophageal cancer.
Right, and so it's tragic. So when you have acid reflux and you're taking these medicines long term, you really need to have an upper endoscopy periodically. Follow the recommendation of the gastroenterologist or the general surgeon that does these. Make sure that it's not progressing into cancer, and do everything you can to prevent this and to eliminate it long term, because your body's trying to tell you something isn't right, and to put a Band-Aid over this with prescription medicines long term is not the solution. And we get these the pharmaceutical companies that make these acid blockers. They will send us often the insurance companies send us letters saying, hey, your patient has been on Nexium for 6 months, just reminding you that this is intended for short-term use. Now, I'm convinced the pharmaceutical companies, they do that legally, but they're really hoping you continue to take it, obviously. But the insurance companies, they can be sued, so they'll tell us, hey, take this, just remind you, let's find other ways. But a lot of providers aren't aware of all the other things you can do. We'll tell them to cut back on the caffeine and tobacco, but they're not aware that too much protein, too many refined foods, too much sugar, and these other melatonin, not aware of some of these other modalities that can be really effective. So we kind of let it slip, and people are on this for long periods of time, and they're not getting the root cause of the problem.
Right,
So
right at the
it's an
base is the diet again, right?
It is the diet and chewing your food well.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about this, what goes in your stomach, you should have it mechanically chewed. It should be in a paste form, even when you're eating steak. By the time you chew it, you shouldn't be able to tell that it should look like you had it in a blender.
Okay.
And it makes it so much easier for the stomach to digest. But most of us, we swallow it. Look what happens to corn on the cob. You see it the next day on the other end, and it's not even chewed up. So a lot of us chew our food way too quickly. A simple thing to do is, take your fork and put a piece of meat in your mouth, put your fork down, chew it for 30 times before you swallow it. Make sure it's well mechanically broken down before you swallow it. You'll digest the food better. You get better, extract more nutrition from it. You won't have these digestive issues as much, and you're going to be much better off. And you'll eat a lot slower. In fact, your caloric intake will be reduced by about 50%, because if you do that, you will be full before you're 3 ounces into that steak, and that's a real simple method for controlling food intake and caloric intake. So
That's a win-win.
it is a win-win, but you got to slow down a little bit. You got to be mindful. And if you see these people in Europe in these outdoor cafes, they spend 2 hours at lunch, and they just talk and chew and talk and chew, and but we're on the run. It's a drive-through. We got to be back at work in 5 minutes, and the hamburger's gone before we got back to work. So there's a lot of lessons we can learn here, but there's a lot you can do to manage acid reflux. Don't allow the medication to control this problem long term. That is not a good idea. Get to the root cause.
Very, very true. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
Yeah, that's Dr. Tim McKnight.